Welcome back, Mindsetters. Welcome to Our Physical Science Show. If you have just joined us, and those of you who have been with us, you know already that we're doing awesome stuff on lithosphere. I hope you guys have been focused, and I can see that you have, because there's some awesome comments and questions and some interaction. And you know I love interaction, because I sit here and I wait for you guys to say something. And if you don't, as you know, I say something to you. So over to you, Tracy.
Thanks. I'm glad you say something to them. Guys, I know probably some of you are waiting for a challenge question, but to give you one on the section seems a little silly. This is a very content-heavy section, okay? So there's not a lot of application. This is really, do you know what all of this means, and can you repeat it, unfortunately? And this is your basis for the next 2 weeks of what we're going to do. Now, and I do apologize for those of you who do geography if I'm going to do the next section a little differently to what you would have learnt in geography, because we're looking at a slightly different focus, okay? Now, when we look at rocks, okay, we're not just looking at the times you pick up and throw around. In terms of rocks are actually a combination of a whole bunch of minerals such as silicon dioxide, aluminium oxide, calcium oxide, potassium oxide, sodium oxide, etc. Lots of them with oxides in, okay? Rocks can be separated into 3 different sections: igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic, and we're not really worried about the rock cycle. Those of you who do geography would learn that. But essentially what happens is igneous rocks, okay, are the things like granite, okay, which I would love to have a granite top kitchen one day, but that means I'm going to have to become a millionaire, and it's not going to happen because I'm a teacher unless I'm very rich, which would be nice.
Yeah, I think
Moving
that's a
on.
good idea.
Anyway, so now, granite and basalt, okay, comes from the fact that magma, which gets brought to the surface through volcanic eruptions. We're lucky we're not on anywhere near a volcano. I'm very, very glad. Not sure I could survive one of those either. It's where our country's great. We don't have sort of don't have tornadoes. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have earthquakes. We don't have volcanoes.
We used to say we don't have snow, but we do.
Yeah, we have a little bit of snow, but really, I mean, seriously, why would you want to live anywhere else? Natural disasters don't really happen. We have a few floods, but that's okay. Moving on.
Not so much.
End of that discussion. So, igneous rocks are formed when made, and it comes to the surface, solidifies, okay? Then, things like sandstone and limestone become our secondary, our sedimentary rocks, okay? Sandstone, limestone, used for buildings, chalk, all of that sort of thing, okay? They happen because we have these rock deposits which then get compacted over time, and eventually they become metamorphic rock again, and heat and intense pressure and all of that sort of stuff turns sedimentary rock into metamorphic rock, which eventually becomes magma, okay? Now, we aren't concerned with the magma. That doesn't help us very much. Igneous rock, sedimentary rock, these are the rocks that are important. What makes it so interesting is that all our minerals are distributed unevenly in the lithosphere. So it isn't a case of, well, every so often you're going to get some gold, and it's just not the way it worked, okay? For whatever reason, everything's been spread unevenly. Like I said earlier, a lot of it ended up with us, which we're very, very grateful for. I don't think we always use it to the best of our ability, but that's what it is, okay? Now, when the igneous rock and sedimentary rock gets buried, it forms an underground, and it gets distributed in the lithosphere. It forms ore. Ores are what we're looking for. And ore is a volume of rock that contains minerals which make it valuable for mining. What that means for us grade 11s is, just because we found, so we go searching and we find a little bit of, let's say, gold in a specific place. We go, yay, we found gold. Doesn't mean we found a gold ore at all. It just means we might have found a very, very small deposit, and it might not be financially viable to mine the gold at that point because the ore isn't of sufficient standard, there's not enough gold in it, whatever the case may be, there's lots of reasons for it. Also remember, things like we have what we call alluvial gold, which is gold that comes through our river system. When you find the gold in the river, that doesn't mean that's the source. That just happens to be where the gold got deposited. The source is actually much further up the river, and that we're going to talk about next week. But the actual place where you'd want to go do the mining is upriver, not at the bottom, because that's only where we deposit some of it. And the places where you can pan gold, they get used up very, 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 very quickly. Okay, and that's also where we get our gold rush from. The Americans had the same. Okay, now, let's do a quick question, which is just making sure you understand where we're coming from. The first question is, where are most of the Earth's minerals concentrated? In the lithosphere. Simple as that. You can't give this answer and go, well, in South Africa. No. We have some of them, but we don't have all of them. And it depends on what we're referring to. But where is it situated? It's in the lithosphere, between the crust and the mantle. Okay, that's what I mean by that question. Now, I put the next question in so that we can realize we know the difference between them. And the question is, explain the difference between a mineral, a rock, and an ore. Okay? Because they all sort of seem very similar, okay? Now, minerals are your compounds that are formed through geological processes, okay? It includes the material's chemical composition and its structure, and it ranges from pure to complex materials. A rock is a combination of one or more minerals, okay? So a mineral is when we have when we consider in the chemical composition. Rock is when we have a combination of minerals, and an ore is when we have enough rocks to make it a viable mining proposition. So pretty much, mineral is where we start from. We combine it all together to get rocks, combine a whole bunch of rocks together in a specific place, we get our ore. Okay, do you guys understand the process? I hope so. Now, where do we use our minerals? Well, just to give you a little bit of and I wrote this down so I'd remember it. Originally, and this is just a fun fact, it was believed that much of Africa's knowledge of metals and their uses was from the Middle East, but this may not have been the case. More recent studies have shown that iron was used far earlier than it would have been if knowledge of this metal had started in the Middle East. Many metal technologies may in fact have developed independently in Africa, and in many African countries, metals have an extremely important part to play in society. In Nigeria's Yoruba country, for example, iron has a divine status because it's used to make the instruments of survival. Ogun, the god of iron, is seen as the protector of the kingdom. So I find that quite interesting. Every country has its own legends around these things. But what do we use minerals for? Jewelry, as a girl I particularly like that. Tools, weapons, unfortunately, machinery, and then other forms of technology. But now, remember, it didn't just happen. Okay, it really didn't just happen. There's a whole bunch of processes that it went through. So we're going to talk about this really briefly. We start off with the Stone Age, which is called just that because stones were used to make tools. Okay? And remember, they would take stones, rub them against each other, use them to sharpen each other. And in Africa alone, we have some stone tools that have been found that date back 2.5 million years. That's just incomprehensible to me. That is a long time. Okay? They didn't have metals. They didn't have the ability to use metals. So technology as such proceeded very, very slowly. Okay? Ate with their hands, used their hands for killing, used stones for killing, used stones for all the other things. Even though they were very much a hunter-gatherer society, and man would have to go out and hunt animals, it's not like they had guns to shoot them, okay? They didn't have arrows. It was all done by stones, and it was all done very, very basically. Okay, then miracles happen. They discover metals. And in fact, one of the first metals discovered was copper. And now we start, not copper, sorry, before we get there was iron, okay? We now get the discovery of metals. Metals now lead to them being able to refine metals. Obviously not quite as complicated as us, not being able to refine things like aluminium, titanium, all of those sort of metals, very, very primitive processes where refining the metal really was as simple as heating it. Simple as that. And then pouring it into molds. Now we start to see lots of developments in agriculture, machinery, weaponry. Okay, now battles are starting to be fought. Unfortunately, they are able to change the way we fight for each other, which is unfortunate, but that's the way life goes. Then they discover gold. Now, gold's been elevated to this incredibly high status, and maybe if you guys have been watching the Olympics, they've actually spoken about this quite often, how athletes who won gold medals will actually bite into them. And they've been saying over and over again, well, if there was real gold, they would actually make a dent in it. And they're 100% correct, the commentators. Real gold, 100% pure gold, is very, very soft. Okay? So in jewelry, you can't get 100% pure gold because it's soft. It would be ridiculous. It wouldn't retain its shape. But gold has been elevated to a place where it's an important part of society and is given, we get the gold price on the news because gold is important to us. Why? Who knows? But probably because it was shiny. So it's a pretty element, okay? It's pretty. Then copper comes along, okay? Copper is a much harder metal. We can now start to develop copper, and we can make copper pots and pans and weapons. Copper is a much harder element, but it's easy to manipulate. It's easy to change its shape. It's easy to mold and that sort of thing. Copper's also got a beautiful color when it's pure. So all of these things happen, and we can now cast it, make it into shapes. After that, we start discovering our ores. Okay, they start going, well, okay. Ores are found up till now. Remember, we're talking about discovering gold and copper and those sort of metals very surface. No mining, no deep level mines like we have in South Africa, which go at least can go as far as a kilometer into the earth. This is all surface. This is the sort of stuff you could dig up without using machinery. Okay? Simple surface stuff, which is why all of this is gone. All the surface ores are gone because it's all being used by the people who could get them. Now we start getting ores. People start to realize, well, actually, we have places where there's lots of this together. This is now leading to things like the development of towns and cities and that sort of thing, and the beginning of mining. And people start to settle where we can get these ores. After that, we start getting things like iron, okay? Bronze isn't found until mining becomes more available. Bronze, remember, is a combination of iron and tin. It's not an element. Please, bronze is not an element. Be very careful there. It's beautiful because of its color. Okay, it looks almost like copper. I'm sure some of your parents at some stage, it's not as popular as it used to be, might have bronzed your first pair of shoes. Those little tiny shoes when you had cute little feet. I know my brother did that with my eldest nephew, and that wasn't that long ago, but he bronzed his pair of shoes. I know my mother did it.
That's nice. Also, sports stars do it.
Yeah, because it's just a way of preserving it, really. But it's, I think that's going out of fashion. It's one of those things. Okay, we then get iron. From iron, we get things like steel, and we get all these other important developments, and the use of our minerals has very much determined what society can do. We don't notice it as much in the age we live in, because you live in a very technological age where every day there's something new happening. We're not really discovering a lot of new elements. We've probably discovered all the ones that are natural to discover, and we can find ores so much more easily now. We have lots of technology to help us. But society's definitely shaped by the way we use our ores, whether you live in a mining country or not. Okay, now, before I get onto that, I think... Are there any questions coming through before?
They're not really any
moving
questions.
on.
But let me just check again. Maybe we should go for an ad break
I
while
think so.
while they can send in your questions.
absolutely.
So during this ad break, ensure that you send in your questions, and also ensure that you actually are understanding. And if you're not, then obviously then you have questions. So send them through and see you after the break.